Have you ever wondered how deep tech companies actually start? Well, we were too.
So in this podcast, we'll be interviewing scientists and entrepreneurs that have taken their ideas out of the lab and turned them into startups. I'm Antonia.
And I'm Christina, and this is Startup the Science. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to our second ever expert episode. And today we're talking with Ulf Håkanson. Who's Ulf?
Well, Ulf is, since very recently, actually, since January 2020, the Chief Intellectual Property Officer at INL. In case you don't know what INL is, you are forgiven. It is the International Iberian Nanotechnology Laboratory.
And they're also an ENA member.
That's right. And they're in the beautiful country of Portugal.
And Ulf was a AdMacom mentor.
He was.
And a very good one at that.
That's right. He's going to get promoted to workshop leader. I don't know what the word is. We've just asked him if for this year's AdMacom, he'd like to actually run a workshop on IP, which he said yes to. So that's good. So you should apply for AdMacom when we open applications to get some of that wisdom into your brains.
Yeah.
So we'll talk to him about IP protection, what is important for startups that are beginning their work in university or in a university context, and they then want to take their IP out of university. What else will we talk about?
Well, IP is a very, very extensive topic, isn't it?
We're going to just try to boil it down to 15 minutes. No need to talk to lawyers anymore. Don't pay lawyers. Just listen to these 15 minutes of wisdom, concentrated wisdom. No, we're going to try to talk about the main points. Yeah. So we'll see how we get on.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Hi, Ulf, and welcome to our podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It's very nice to have you today. And we're talking about a very important topic, especially for startups, which is IP protection. So tell us a little bit more first about who you are and what your background is in this field.
My name is Ulf. I'm a scientist from background. Long time ago, spent the last 20 years in research and in specifically in key-enabled technologies like nanotechnology, and then moved into the field of intellectual property. So I'm a European patent attorney. And I have the pleasure at working now at the institute, sort of transferring knowledge and intellectual property to the markets.
First, just out of curiosity, can you tell us why did you move to this field from science to IP, transfer to IP protection, not transfer?
The transfer relates most to the wish, I think, to be part of the transfer. Because there's a lot of very nice research being done and not everything comes out. So there are more values than just the research results. And to be part of that process is a pleasure.
Mm-hmm. So in your job, you do work with a lot of startups that are spin-offs from universities. Is that right?
Yes, I've worked with several in different situations as a patent attorney, as a researcher, and now in my current role.
And what would you say is the top challenge or for a startup, let's say, that is starting off in university? So if we had a scenario, for instance, of a chemist doing his PhD, and during his PhD, he discovers a new process leading, for instance, to a new material. This is the type of startup we'd be more familiar with. What's the main challenge that he'd be faced with in this context?
I think it's the complexity of things. There are so many parts in the same time. So you have the research results that are important as such and should be deployed for society to take on and build further on. There is the commercial aspects of it. What values is it for the market, for the users, to capture that? And related to that is, I think the primary thing is ownership. In what position did you develop the technologies? Is it yours? Is it partners?
So that's a problem we've seen quite often. I'm not sure if problem is the right word, but if you've started developing this technology in a university setup, right? You're doing your PhD or postdoc or whatever you're doing. Who owns this technology?
In many situations, I would say it belongs to the university. Okay. There are a few countries having a professor's privilege where it belongs to the scientists.
So what should the scientist do then if he thinks, well, yeah, but this could be a company and it could be my company?
I would like to take one step back and then to say that one should first capture the ideas and inventive concept. And the easiest way to do that is actually through the old school logbooks. To write down things when things happen, and then makes the storytelling much easier. I was in this concept, these persons were present, we made this discovery, and then you take it from there. Then you have where the fact was, where the ideas were created, and then you can start. Then you have to discuss and understand that there are a lot of technology transfer and legal entities within universities, for instance, that can assist and to see what rules there are.
So first step is to basically keep track of what your process was and how you got to this new discovery.
Yeah, it's simple like that. We capture the results anyway, but I think it's more when you have an idea, it's not the research results as such, but the idea, it's just to write it down, to capture it. And it's a good practice in everything. It's like you're building your CV, you capture experiences. And if they're not written down, they disappear.
And is that something you see scientists do or not so much?
I think there is an increased awareness, and scientists have this mentality to be analytical and write very nice records on every research activity they do. Not always really stating where they are and who was there, because there's a difference between authorship and inventorship.
Okay, what's the difference?
I think in general, an authorship in a general way of a scientific publication, so that those that contribute to the work and the result that came out from this. It could be in the planning of the result, it could be special techniques and characterization techniques and so forth that's been used, and knowledge going into the project. When it comes to inventions, the general idea is that it's only those who contributed to the inventive concept as such. The idea of it. If you just perform, although it could be very tricky, experiments to verify your idea, that's not part of developing actually the inventive concept.
So if you have a team of 2 or 3 scientists, this is a scenario we also often see in ANMACOM or other events we do. We usually have teams of 2 or 3 scientists. And they work together on a project, on a new concept. How shall I put this nicely? Is there ever any conflict between the scientists as who came up with the idea, and how do they resolve these challenges?
That could happen, but I think normally it's a teamwork to do research today. To go cutting edge research, and you need to be a team. So the thing is just to have your papers clear and to make sure that you write down what happens, who was there, and look at the contractual agreements of those. Are they affiliated? What universities? Are some affiliated to a research program within companies? Then there are other laws. What are the funding mechanisms? I think it's just the bookkeeping. If you have that from the beginning and write down the ideas, then you have a very easy process from there on, I think.
Is it an easy process then? Because I think we sometimes have this perception that if the university owns the concept, let's say initially, it's quite difficult to get that out of the university for a scientist when they want to turn it into a startup. Is it
that could be challenging. It's always a negotiation. But in many situations, I think what I've seen is that the universities, they don't want to be in the driving seat. They're going to concentrate on education. They want to concentrate on building the knowledge, excellent research. But the marketing and sales, is usually better that is kept by those that have the passion for it. And normally that's the inventor and the researcher, and they can take this with them. So I think fair and reasonable conditions is not an issue. The problem is to get to the point and to get the speed to get there. So the more the scientists are prepared for this, then it's easier for also, and have this documentation that makes the process much easier for the university to allow for the technology transfer. And there are a lot of fantastic technology transfer offices in the universities all over the world. So, but ownership is an issue, and if you go back in history to find this, then it's a tricky issue.
And how long would this process take from the moment when, or roughly from the moment when a scientist wants to take the idea out of university and they start this process? Let's say they have the log, they've kept track of all their activities.
That's very difficult to say, I think. It depends so much where you are in the process and how mature you are and what contractual agreement you work upon. If you're in a project, you might have to wait until the project is ending and you use the kind of foreground results for further exploitation. But I think many times you can do this in parallel if it's not in a conflict with the current activities in your project. So that is not the speed. And to capture the idea is a pretty quick process. Then to verify it and to take the other steps and to bridge the steps from idea to actually product or service, that's a longer process. As you all know, that's the life of a startup.
So going back to what I was originally wondering about. So if you have a case of a startup with both the process and the material, we see that a lot. What should we do as startup advisors? What should we tell our startups to do? To consider patenting the process, the material, both? Where should they start? I know there's not one recipe for success, but what would be your guidance?
Okay, so if we leave the sort of timing and assume the situation that they have enough knowledge that this is actually the product or material they would use, and they found an efficient process. So patents you are to protect the technical part of an inventive concept. So it relates then to them for capturing, say, and protect the material as such, or the system that they have developed, in order to make sure that others cannot use this. So they can hinder others from using it. It doesn't tell them that they are free to use it. There could be other rights out there. But that is a good start to capture the technical aspects of an invention. As long as you have filed a patent first to file over that time, then there's no problems with novelty, which is a criteria for patent. So you start there as a T0, and then you can start to deploy and discuss and explore your technology. The other part is more complicated when it comes to processes. It's something, if it's easy to reverse engineer, then it's probably likely to keep it secret, because that's a know-how and value that you build into your company. But you should still, I think, write it down. Make sure, and that is an important thing, that you capture it in a sense that everyone involved knows that we keep this secret. And then there can be physical measures also to keep it secret, but that's a detail. But as soon as the startup scales, this starts to be knowledge for everyone in the company, perhaps, but then they take it for granted. So to capture this and to keep it out, and tell as little as possible when you discuss. You have a process, you don't have to tell how the process is. This, of course, has to be balanced with the interest of a scientist to exploit their research result for the benefit of the research community. But if you do this from the beginning, I think you can have a win-win situation.
And what should you maybe consider as a startup? What should you consider keeping completely secret, like not writing in a patent application at all? Is there such a thing?
Yeah, I think the business model as such could in many sense be secret. The companies you're working with, the ideas you think, the markets you think, databases, there are special measures for databases, especially in Europe. I think all kind of concept and know-how, all the small details you have, you can actually keep out and then have the major steps.
Another question we sometimes get from startups is when to file for patents. Is it better to do it at the very beginning before they even consider, setting up a production line or scaling up? Or should they do it a bit later on when they have a more solid business model and they know, okay, this is likely to become a thing, they're likely to make money out of it, so now we're also filing for patents. Is it better to do it at the start, or should they wait a bit for the concept to prove to work?
Too early is difficult, because you will have an idea, and the idea you're not sure if the markets are where you will how you will use this technology, and if it doesn't work, does it work in a different way than you expected? The other designs around? So if you can kind of let it mature a little bit and keep it within the closest circle of researchers in this case, then you're better off to actually know what you want to protect. Then that said, the earlier the better. So you can capture the ideas at an early stage as well, and then of course build on other aspects of it, special applications, special technologies. Then you're in a very good IP strategy position.
Right, and there are all these little nuggets of wisdom we hear sometimes. Like one of them is you shouldn't present an idea that is not yet patented anywhere in public, because then you can't patent it anymore. Is that true?
Yeah, the novelty is an absolute criteria. So it cannot be disclosed the idea in any way, anywhere. So you need to keep that in secret. But still, for things to happen, you need to talk to people. And then you have to have balances, like who are you forming relationships with? Of course, you have to disclose. There are formal agreements. I think you will have other podcasts related to the legal aspects. But non-disclosure agreements and other things are something more in the formal matter. But then you have ideation sessions you still need with people in order for things to happen. So if you're too protectionist, nothing will happen. So.
But for example, you couldn't go and present your idea at a conference.
No, you can't. You can't. No publication, nothing.
Right.
But you can file a patent and then do the publication the day after. It's not a problem.
Right. So you need to find a
balance. So you can have both.
It is a bit complicated. Do you find the scientists are struggling a lot with this? Is this one of the things that concerns them? We found, for example, during the last AdmaCom that IP became one of the things that was keeping startups up at night after they had a few mentoring sessions, because they realized they had the wrong strategy or they had no strategy. Or do you think it's a major concern for startups coming from?
I think it is for any startups, and I think to go and have legal counseling at an early stage to iterate these issues, and go home and then kind of read. There are a lot of nice material out there European Help Desk for IP and others that easily access to get the right mindset. If you have the mindset, then it's not that difficult actually to capture. Then you come, I would say that if you then want to formalize your intellectual property, then you should use professionals. I think that's the worst of investments for those. Like a legal contract, it should be solid when it's done, if it should have real value.
So when you say investment, can we get a rough idea of what should a startup budget for when it comes to IP advice, or not necessarily an amount?
That varies so much. So I think it's depends on also where the listeners are and what kind of aid there is out there in projects, and technology transfer officers might have kind of scholarships and related things to sort of tickets for innovation. It is a costly process, but it's a lot you can do by yourself also in the beginning of looking at your competitors. What are they doing? Think of your ideas on a bigger perspective, not only on the technology you develop that are brilliant in itself. It has a lot of advantages, but could someone get the same type of advantages by alternative designs? Because this is actually in the end what the market will want to select upon. So if you can think broader along the real inventive concept and then think about other strategies to come there, then you're very good.
Sounds very interesting, but also a bit complicated. Hopefully our startups, if they're hearing this, they can maybe contact you, or they can find someone to advise them in this field before they start to seriously
I
get
think
into
and many law firms also have free sessions the first kind of hours and so to iterate, and you can learn a lot from that. And I think also from the university systems now.
And finally, can you tell us what are some of your favorite startups that you've worked with, so that we end on a happy note and maybe promote some startups?
I worked with very nice startups. I think within I've been mentoring a few very interesting companies in my previous job. I don't want to mention names, but very interesting concept. And I think this mostly the team, the passion and the kind of courage people have to find new solutions to existing problems, or actually inventing problems as such, is amazing. So
thank you so much for being on our episode today. Is there any final word, anything else you'd like to say to the startups or anyone else who might be listening to this?
The final words to a startup is just, so I would say, just keep on going, because it's a struggle to be a startup, but it's worth it.
We think so too. Great. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you at the next AdmaCom as a mentor.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for sticking around all the way to the end of the episode. We really appreciate it. If you want to get in touch with Ulf or learn more about INL or AdmaCom, I've left the links in the description. Also, if you want to get in touch with us, you can follow us on LinkedIn, on Instagram, and you can even email us. We have an email. It's info@enum.berlin, and I'll leave that in the description as well. We have a lot more exciting episodes coming your way, so stay tuned, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks. Until then,